I was scrolling through Amazon Prime a couple days ago and I came across a film that I hadn't seen in a very long time. It's been about like 10 years or so, and that film is celebrating its 30th anniversary. So, of course, I wanted to sit down here, turn the mic on, and start talking about my thoughts and takes on 1994's The Crow, directed by Alex Provost, and stars the late great Brandon Lee, son of Bruce Lee. But Brandon Lee was a damn good actor that we lost way too soon, and unfortunately he did lose his life on the set of The Crow, and we will discuss that. But we were also going to talk about the lasting legacy that The Crow does have, and why Brandon Lee was a really up-and-coming talented actor, and this movie was by far way better than I ever remember it being. I even had to up my star rating because this is a damn great movie. I wanted to talk about this movie not just because I just recently revisited it, but I also know that Variety did drop the first image of Bill Skarsgård in the lead role as Eric Draven, the kind of vigilante hero that we get to see in The Crow. And a lot of people on X, Twitter, are kind of up in arms with the photo and saying that it doesn't look good. But I will reserve my judgment until I get to see the film, because sometimes these images are not finished, and sometimes the images are out of context, and we don't know what to make of them until we actually see the final product on screen. Now, granted, it does give off some Jared Leto Suicide Squad vibes, but at the same time, it did kind of look like some of the original comic book that this was adapted off of. So we do have this lasting legacy that Brandon Lee has with this Crow movie. And I know The Crow does have a lot of history, and there is rumors of a curse coming out because The Crow, this reboot of The Crow that's coming out later on this year, had been in the work for many years. Again, probably about 10 years or so that this movie was rumored to come out. I know Jason Momoa at one time was billed to be the star of this film, and he's not anymore, and we get to see a new interpretation of Eric Draven. But I do want to go back and discuss why The Crow from 1994 is actually way better than you remember it being. Exactly 1 year after young rock guitarist Eric Draven and his fiancée are brutally killed by a ruthless gang of criminals, Draven, watched over by a hypnotic crow, returns from the grave to exact his revenge. Alright, so the premise of this movie is definitely a straight up, comes at you with revenge brutality right there. Has a lot of cool imagery, and I think Alex Proyas, who wasn't, that name doesn't really pop out to me as a director that I remember seeing anything of his films, but as I do click on his letterbox here, I have seen a few of his movies. I've seen iRobot, I've seen the Nicolas Cage Knowing film, which is actually kind of underrated there as well, but really that's the only one that really pops off to me. Dark City was another like late 90s, early 2000s film that I remember seeing the poster for, but never actually spent time to actually watch that film. But this is probably his best well-known work because of the cult status that The Crow does have. Now, way back when I first saw it several years ago, I thought this was a really good, solid film. Nothing too interesting about it other than the great performance that Brandon Lee did give us. And Brandon Lee, after on revisit, he is by far one of the best things that I remember in 1994 did bring us. I've seen a lot of movies from 1994, not as many as others, but I can safely say that if I had to cast a ballot and submit my best actor nominations, Brandon Lee is going to be top 5 for me. Brandon Lee is fantastic as this role of Eric Draven. He not only just gives you kind of like this, he doesn't give you a typical comic book superhero story. He has a lot of more layers to his character. He's a man that's grieving. He's a man that just came back from the dead. He's being he has to deal with this new power and this kind of responsibility to exact his revenge and pay back the untimely murder of himself and his fiancée, who he loved very much. And what Brandon Lee was able to do with this story was able to emote such emotions and power through his actions here. He wasn't just all about the physicality and brutality that the movie does show. There's a lot more under the layers and under the surface of his character. You could feel the pain that he is feeling because he lost his fiancée. He's exacting the revenge that is rightfully needed to happen for the murders of himself and his fiance that he loved very much. You could feel that in the feel of his power that came through that. It also has some really great performances of actors that I remember seeing. Actors like Michael Wilcott, who was like a 90s staple for villains there. He has that grisly, deep voice that is iconic. And he's actually interesting in this movie. He has super like long hair, which is kind of silly, but perfect for this world. He is kind of the perfect foe who is the overseer of this gang that did go out and kill Eric Draven and his fiance. We got Ernie Hudson coming off of a movie I had just recently seen from '89, a few years earlier, and that was Leviathan, which is kind of like a mix between The Abyss meets Alien meets The Thing. So it's an interesting little take there. So check out that one if you're interested. But Ernie Hudson's primarily known for movies like Ghostbusters, and he has a comedic timing. And this one, it's a really cool cop character here as well. He has some funny undertones to the performance there, but it's cool to see Ernie Hudson and Brandon Lee kind of match wits there too. It's fun to see him there. And of course, we got Rochelle Davis here as Sarah. And Rochelle Davis didn't really do much after The Crow, but she is really solid in this one as a young child performer who was friends with Eric's fiance, so there's a relationship there, and her interactions with the Crow or Eric was really awesome. And seeing the kind of where her story ended up, and kind of seeing how Eric was able not just to save her, get redemption, but also save Rochelle's or Sarah's mother in this movie too was really awesome to see. And of course, we got to talk about the actor who is kind of underrated when it comes to like horror imagery, and that is Tony Todd. I know him as the Candyman, but he is really good and understated in this movie, and very underrated performer there. And seeing him as kind of a henchman, it's kind of fascinating. He's like the muscle to Michael Wilcott's character. Michael Wilcott plays a character named Top Dollar here. It's kind of a perfect kind of villain name to Top Dollar. But anyway, Tony Todd does play this kind of henchman, big muscle guy really well, and seeing him kind of go up to toe with the Crow was just fun and a treat to see. Well, the imagery is dark and goth-like. It's fascinating to look at. They also use really early CGI technology here to kind of regenerate a lot of Eric's powers here, because he has this Wolverine. I guess we're gonna throw Wolverine out there because he's primarily known to have regeneration, but the Crow also does have this. And as a person who's not familiar with the comics whatsoever of the Crow, it's interesting to see his kind of power set. He's a man that does have the regeneration. He has the awesome hypnotic crow that does follow him out and bring him his powers as well. And having the CGI actually looked really well so many years later. It's been 30 years now since this movie has been released, so CGI plays really well here. However, knowing what we do now so many years later, especially the tragic passing of Brandon Lee on the set of this movie, and we will discuss a little further, but there's several times where guns are pointed at Brandon Lee, and you don't know which scene he actually does lose his life. I do know the actor that was the unfortunate actor to pull the trigger of this prop gun that did have, I guess, a bullet casing in it, and that actually did take his life. And reading articles online, seeing that they thought he was just going to get up. There was something misunderstanding, negligence on set where something was in the chamber, and it did get discharged, and it struck Brandon, and he was pretty much pronounced dead 6 hours after the incident did happen. He was in like a 6-hour procedure or something like that. So several hours after it actually happened, he was actually pronounced dead in a very eerily way. And of course, they did finish the film. There were some scenes that they still needed to film on this movie, so they had to use a different actor. And a lot of those sequences are kind of seamlessly put in there, and so you can't really know which one's him, which one's not him. And kudos for the production team to be able to put that out there. However, it is sad. This is not the first time this has happened. And of course, a couple years ago, I think it's 2022, 2023-ish time, another tragic, unnecessary death did happen on a set of a film in the same way. A gun was discharged, and that something was in there, and it struck and killed the actor that was on set. And this is where it gets really tough, because we don't know where Brandon Lee's career would have been after this movie. My speculation was that this was his very first big blockbuster film, that I think his stardom was going to skyrocket, very much like his dad's. I think his dad was one of the first big like action movie stars, definitely an international sensation with Bruce Lee. But Brandon Lee was going to be up there in the 90s. He wasn't going to be as big as like an Arnold or a Sylvester Stallone like that, but he was going to pack some underrated prowess there. Brandon Lee gave me those vibes that if his stardom was going to skyrocket after this movie, he was going to be on the trajectory of like a Heath Ledger, a guy that was going to blow up and become a heartthrob out there. I can only imagine a lot of people were going to start signing this guy up to be in a lot of their movies after they saw The Crow. He just oozed charisma, kind of like a Heath Ledger did, and he brings really a lot of emotions to his roles and this role here. So of course he was going to blow up, and it reminded me of Heath Ledger. And we both lost both of these actors really young, but not in such a way like, unfortunately, Brandon Lee did die here. The Crow is a fantastic, timeless film that it's not just spaced in 1994, but it's something that we can all relate to. I feel like we can all put ourselves in the shoes of Eric Draven while we watch this movie, because as a family man myself, if anything happened to my girls or myself and I was able to exact my revenge and make my enemies feel the pain that they caused on my family, why wouldn't I want to do that? But because you feel that. It's something that's real and weighted on yourself, and Brandon Lee was a perfect vessel to embody this character. And let's talk about some perfect casting. I definitely feel like The Crow got him spot on here. It's a dark, gritty, pretty damn awesome movie that on our website, almostsideways.com, I do have this at 3.5 stars, but I'm going to go 4 stars. I think this is definitely closer. I have to reevaluate my top 10 here, but I loved this revisit of The Crow. I am really excited to see what Bill Skarsgård does with the character. I think it's pretty safe casting. I think that if you're going to cast somebody in today's Hollywood, Bill Skarsgård would probably be the guy you're going to go with. We've seen him in makeup before as Pennywise and other performances here, but he's a good actor. But Brandon Lee is the bar. You gotta hit Brandon Lee here, and you gotta get respect in this guy's name. He is such a talented actor. We did lose way too soon. So if you haven't, go check out The Crow. It's streaming on Amazon Prime. It's free. It's worth the watch. It's a film that it's worth the revisit. I remember really liking it, but I'm blown away by this one, and I have to add this to my film collection because I feel like it's missing that film now. So, The Crow. Have you guys seen it? What do you guys think of The Crow? We'd love to have a good conversation with you down in the comments section down below. And if you also like this video, give it a subscribe. We would love to have you join the conversation on each and every one of our videos. Again, my name is Adam of Almost Sideways. Until next time, I will see you the next one.